Sometimes when I'm thinking about us, before we got lost and we parted, back to back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. Sometimes when I'm reasoning about us, I know you got me, it's so effortless. Back to back we would carry on and we'd do anything for what we started. But this time we could break. I'm running dry, everything's the same. We'll try tonight. This time we're not safe and sound, not safe and sound. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? Yeah. What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me? What if I'm no good for you? What if you're no good for me?
What? Where am I? It's been so long. I don't even know what the studio looks. What do these buttons do? And the big question that we're all about to find the answer to is Blunty back from peeing? Yes, he is.
Hello.
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 Excuse me.
Welcome back.
Sorry, I did mute myself for the coughing. No, I'm fine. I'm well. How are you?
Good. Good. It's good to be back.
It's good to be back. It is good to be back. There are very few things that can take me away from all of this for a long period of time, but one of them is the work I was going to go do, and then I didn't even get to do it for half of the trip. I was just sick in a hotel room. So, but some people would be like, "What do you mean, bro? You got to hang out in a hotel room, just chill and relax." And I'm not wired that way. I don't know what to tell you. How was your 2 weeks?
It was good.
Did you miss the news?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. I don't know. I miss it and I don't miss it sometimes, because the data collection can be pros and cons. But
it's not like there was any big stories during the 2 weeks I was gone.
No stories at all. Nothing happened. Nobody revealed any information. So
big stuff. How's your fishing going? How's the Russian fishing simulator? I know that's what you're still playing. I can see it in the Steam notifications.
It's going great. It's going wonderful. Yeah.
Awesome.
I just caught my first wild carp. I caught a trophy wild carp. So yeah. Making progress.
That's awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody, to the FPV news. I apologize that the 7th was. I thought today was the 7th. I knew I was coming back on the 7th, and on Saturday, my wife said to me, "Hey, are you streaming tomorrow?" And I was like, "No, that's silly. Why would I?" Or Sunday morning. She's like, "Are you streaming today?" I was like, "No, why would I stream the day after I came back from a trip? Of course I'm gonna no, we're not. We're coming back on Tuesday for the news. I wouldn't miss the news." And then Siati was like, "Hey, the stream's going. People are waiting for you." And I was like, "Ooh, if I had a boss, he'd be mad at me right now." But I'm here now. Oh, and we have a lot of news, Blunty. We got some big stories this week. Stories about DJI and Caddx.
Stories about Caddx and more DJI, remote ID, which is going to be a big one. ID,
Jesus. So let's go ahead and get into it. Oh, and we're going to start, though, as we always do, we're going to start with some PSAs, just a couple of little important things before we get into the big stories of the week. And I don't have the show notes up on the other window, so Blunty, you're going to have to start us off.
Our first story is going to be a PSA about JHEMCU, and we've brought you a couple of those in the past. Unfortunately, we do have another one, and this one is it's being brought to you because not only do we have testing by Recursion Labs, who's a YouTuber. I think we've looked at a prop test by him before in the past, but he's done some testing on some of his boards, and then he's got some logs from other people's boards. There's basically a gyro issue. He's not sure if it's the gyro, if it's the design, like exactly what the problem is, but basically these new JHE MCUs that are shipping with the 420 AIO with the ICM gyros. They're unfortunately having a huge issue with gyro noise. He even tried rotating the board to fix them and stuff, but didn't have a lot of success. This would be kind of anecdotal, but unfortunately, they released this knowing this because the second link that we have is to jhemcu.com. And they actually have a guide which doesn't solve all the problems, but they literally say to turn up your filters as a baseline for this board.
Right.
And if that's not a red flag, I can't imagine what it is.
Any gyro chip that can't run on 1.0, look at the gyro filter multiplier. I'm not sure if it's too small for people to see. 0.55. That is a broken level of filtering. It's just broken.
And reports are that like makes it better, but it still has twitches, still has problems. Just like makes it better. Yeah.
The data that I was shown, and this was in an email thread. I assume that's the same guy who reached out to you. But the data that I was shown showed a noise peak down around 20 hertz. Yeah. And if that's accurate, there's no way you can filter that. It's impossible. It's too low.
Yeah, it seems like there's an issue in the design. Those gyros are in testing by other companies. I know, I think Mamba, there's a Mamba board out with that and a couple others that people have done testing on to see how they work. So we'll have more reports on that at some point in the future. But this one definitely seems like a concern considering they released this board knowing there's a filtering issue. I just think that's it's a super big issue. So if you have this board, I would definitely contact your vendor and try to get it, I would get it returned or something, because that design seems like there's an issue with the design. Every board that I've seen tested so far has had this problem, and they admit there's a problem baseline in the tune-it, right?
Are we saying are you saying that the ICM 42688P gyro is basically don't buy anything that has it?
No, we don't know anything about that gyro. We just know the design they used in this board does not seem to be good. I haven't seen verified testing good or bad from other places. I know the Betaflight developers have been working with other board manufacturers to test this gyro, and I believe initial tests have been going okay, but I believe it's going to be like one of these things where it'll be design dependent, and if JHEMCU doesn't talk to anybody like they never do, they may just not make the right design on the board until they ask
So there's something else going on maybe in the 3.3 volt power supply rail, the capacitors and so forth.
This is another case of, hey, we've got a new gyro, very untested, just being added to Betaflight, like all that kind of stuff. So, I think we're going to be seeing those kinks being worked out like we've seen with some of these other gyros. So
for the time being, it is only the JHEMCU, GHF 420 AIO. That thing is do not touch it.
Yes, because so far everyone I've seen tested has had the issue, and JHEMCU admits there is an issue.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to see more and more of this as time goes on, because manufacturers are having to reach further and further afield to get components that are, never mind inexpensive, that are available at all. So hopefully this can be made to work. And I don't know. I was going to say I don't know how hard we should be on JHEMCU because, hey, this kind of thing. But why the F would you release it into the wild and sell it to customers and not test it?
Well, the problem is they did test it and they saw it needed more filtering, and they provided more filtering in the thing. So like it's like an acknowledgement of we know we're still doing it. That's the way I look at it. Because if they provided it with nothing and it was bad, then we could go, maybe they didn't know. We know they knew. They just decided to present it to us like this, right?
Yeah,
so
they were hoping they would get away with it.
The other problem is, and this is my understanding, and I'm going to like say this on the news, maybe somebody knows somebody who can talk to somebody, but my understanding is JHEMCU is not in contact with any developers from anywhere. They're not in contact actively with ExpressLRS developers, not in contact with Betaflight developers. If you or someone you know knows how to get in contact with somebody from JHEMCU so they can actually get information about their board designs and properly fix things and get on the Betaflight list that they're developing for good hardware and things like that, like, everybody's happy to work with them. So
I mean, it's not like it's hard to get in contact with the Betaflight developers and so forth. If they wanted to, they probably could. It
seems like there's very little even English translational speak coming from them at all.
You think there's a
language barrier? I don't know if they don't have any representative and it's just a hard language barrier or what's going on, but it is unfortunate. So yeah.
Okay. Next up, we have a PSA about the iFlight Commando 8, but specifically only the CC2500 version, not the ExpressLRS versions. Let's put this up on screen. So this is an email from iFlight support. The CC2500 has a frequency deviation problem that causes it to basically not be able to bind or to have short range with the R81 receiver.
And basically, it's such an issue that they've been refunding customers. We got an email from a customer that I saw from iFlight, and it seems like they are refunding customers or providing replacements, and just asking people, either buy another radio or buy an ExpressLRS version because we don't have a way to fix this right now, which is unfortunate. But at least it looks like they're making good on this to people. So if you have this issue, if you have one of these, I would definitely, and you have a problem with it, or you have low link quality, basically, it sounds like it's out of spec, and you need to contact.
Is this only an issue with the R81 receiver? Does this work correctly with
it seems like it
FreeSky
works
receivers?
correctly with the R81, but not with others. Because the R81 has an offset, and it was designed to the offset. That's my understanding.
Now, typically, the multi-protocol, they'll have a frequency fine-tune that you can do. Does that not work?
My understanding is it's so far off you can't get an initial bind, so you're like fighting to get a frequency tune. Like, you know what I mean? Like, basically, it's sort of like not worth fighting with because it might be so far off. But basically, again, they're admitting there's a problem with it. So if I had this radio and I had any concern at all with that, I would definitely contact them for some kind of replacement.
All the more reason to move to ExpressLRS, because those receivers don't ever have frequency issues. Never mind.
Maybe more on that next week. Okay.
Maybe more next week. Those are our public service announcements for the week. And now it's time to get into our first big story of the week. And the wheel of randomness says that the first story is going to be DJI leaks. Oh, DJI leaks plenty. It's been so long since I leaked a DJI. We need like an adult diapers commercial. Do you have a problem with DJI leaks?
Yeah.
But we do have some stuff. Extra absorbent.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we got a bunch of stuff here. On the 30th of July, I don't know if I kicked off the DJI goggles, but it sure seems like I did, because I shared a picture that I got and some data that I got on the 30th and the day after that. Here I basically tell you. So this is all stuff I saw on paperwork. This is not conjecture. This is real information that came from a DJI released piece of information that I know is legitimate. The date is the issue, right? So maybe things changed since we saw this, but I can guarantee you all this was correct at one point. So basically, the V2 goggles work and are listed to work with OcuSync 3 air units. They work at 810p basically with the OcuSync 3 air units and 1080p otherwise. 120 FPS for the V2s, 100 FPS because they're OLED goggles for the goggles 2. 51 degree FOV, little smaller than the old goggles. H265 is at least supported by the goggles. We're not sure if that's over the air, but we're assuming that's over the air. And then, so we've got some pictures of all this stuff if we scroll down here. But basically, the other information I got was we don't have real canvas mode again. Sounds like we're going to have maybe more elements, but the same OSD solution we had before. An Action 3 is also coming out. A DJI Action 3 is also coming out in November. A lot of Hasselblad tech in it with a 10-bit color, and it'll be back in the Osmo Action GoPro form factor to compete with GoPro. And then the last thing we heard was the 2 bundles that we'll see here if we scroll down, and that's basically there's one bundle with the V2 goggles, and there's one bundle with the goggles 2. Interestingly enough,
so that was one piece of news that came out from these leaks that was very interesting to me. That the new air unit is going to work with both the current goggles and the new goggles.
With the V2 goggles and the new goggles. As far as I know, the V1s will probably not work. We don't have confirmation. I don't have confirmation of that, but there's been that was not on the documents. All the documents just talked about the V2 goggle and the goggles 2, not the V1. I expect that it works in DJI FPV drone mode, and that's why.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, that's plausible. That makes sense.
So my guess is for the same reason that we didn't get an update for the DJI FPV drone on V1, we won't get the update for these new air units. That's my guess. I don't know that for sure, but it was definitely not on the paperwork. But the V2 goggles were on the paperwork specifying the 810p. So.
Right. So it's exciting for people who have the V2 goggles. And by the way, it's a little confusing because the current goggles that we've got are the DJI FPV goggle V2, and then the new goggles are
the goggles 2. However, internally they were called the FPV Vision, which I don't know why they didn't call them something different, but they are called the goggles 2.
Well, don't forget that there's the old DJI goggle and the goggles RE, which don't exist anymore. Then there's the DJI FPV goggle V1 and V2, and now the goggles 2. But it is exciting that people with the goggles 2 will, if these leaks are accurate, have the ability to try this new air unit if they want to, and have it be compatible. Do we know if the new goggles are backwards compatible with existing Vistas and air units?
There are a couple of rumors out there that they are, but none of my contacts have told me anything verifiable that is correct. So I hope that's true, but I have not seen any evidence of that yet. So.
Yeah, okay. We haven't seen, whereas we have seen evidence of the alternative. So in this case, the closer we get to the release, whenever that might be, the lack of evidence starts to look like evidence for the opposite.
So the other story we have is from Drone XL. It's just a sort of a spec release. Some of the specs are wrong. I know that from looking at the paperwork. Like they say 810p on the goggles 2, but that doesn't make sense, obviously, because goggles 2 are 1080. But if some of these are to be believed, right, then they have what they think are early prices. Basically, they say the bundle with the goggles 2 and the motion controller will be $1388. As their pricing. So yeah, they have some of this information here. What was the one thing I was going to say? They also
the goggles themselves are $650. The new
goggles.
They're
saying $650. Yeah,
and I think for FPV pilots, I mean, I don't think FPV pilots are going to necessarily be jumping out of their seats to buy the drone. Some people will buy it. It's probably going to be pretty amazing for what it is. But $650 for the goggles. If the goggles are not backwards compatible with the existing Vistas and air units, again, FPV pilots are probably not going to be jumping out of their seats to get them.
Yep. And then we have what's claimed for specs on both the drone and the air unit here. And if that's to be believed, we've got basically the same specs on the drone cam and the air unit cam, which is that 1x1.7 sensor, 155 degree FOV, that 2.8 aperture. It seems to be fairly high quality, and they say on the Avata the recording is 4K 60 or 2.7K 100, which would be pretty cool. If that's also the case on the air unit, because it seems like there's similar camera hardware between. It's not the same camera, but it seems to be a similar camera internal. So
one thing that is potentially exciting about this, if this pans out, is that the air unit may have 2.7K 100 FPS recording, which is going to convince a lot of people to skip. I mean, it depends on the image quality. It's going to convince a lot of people to skip the GoPro.
The rumor is it'll basically be an Action 2. The rumor is it'll have rock steady, right, and the horizon steady. So it'll basically be like you have an Action 2, but the camera is split from the unit, and then we'll have a battery. That
doesn't excite me that much because I just bought a couple of Action 2s thinking I was going to make it my main camera, and then I just couldn't deal with the image quality and the exposure algorithm, and I ended up buying a bunch of GoPro Hero 8s, and now my Action 2s, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. So, But I think there are a lot of people who are happy with it and will enjoy saving the weight. How's the weight, by the way?
The Avata, the air unit is listed at 35.7, which is about what I heard. I heard it was between the Vista and the air unit currently, basically. So that makes sense. 35.7 isn't crazy, especially if you get that 2.7K or 4K recording.
Exactly.
Like, that's a really big step up. The price is a little bit concerning. If the price is believed to be correct, it's $250 to $300. Which, if you consider the internals of an Action 2, that kind of makes sense. If they've got that nice of a camera on it, right?
The thing about an action camera is you spend $500 on it one time and you move it between your quads. The thing with an air unit like this is it's going to have to be one for every aircraft, and that adds up. So you're saving a fair amount of weight. You're spending a fair amount more money, and the big unknown is the image quality. Frankly, I'm not unhappy with the current DJI camera. I would... I was about to say, not a lot of people run the air unit, though, to get that onboard recording. Most people today run a Vista and an action camera. So the idea that people want an integrated onboard, it maybe doesn't pan out. Although maybe if the image quality is much better, then maybe it would make a difference.
Yeah. Some other features I've heard from the V2 goggles, we've got basically 2 internal antennas and 2 external antennas, so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Basically only 2 user replaceable, it seems like, probably RPSMA, but we can't see in the ports. We've got the, what else we got in here? We've got OLED, we talked about that. There's supposed to be Wi-Fi video to the goggles. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work, but basically it talks about transmitting from a supporting device in the early information I saw.
Is this a leak with the antennas removed?
Yes. Okay,
so the antennas, we do think the antennas are removable.
Yes, it's not known if there's like a UFL you plug in inside with the faceplate off, or if it's like a screw-in, RPSMA like we're used to.
What about the RC Link, Blunty, the controller? Does it work with the FPV controller V2, the gray one?
Oh, we don't know about the air unit.
We don't know.
The Avata does. Yeah,
the Avata does. We don't know about the air unit. Okay.
We don't know about the air unit. Yeah, or they made an identical controller that the Avata works with, and it's different. But as far as we know, it is the same DJI FPV controller.
It seems like the Avata just has the air unit in it, although, and so if that were true, it would seem like the controller would also work with the new air unit.
Yeah, it may. Well, I don't know that we're clear on that. But
okay. And of course the motion controller.
I'm trying to think of what else we haven't shared here.
Yeah. What about, so it feels like the release of the Avata and the goggles is coming soon. Do we know anything about release schedule?
That's what I was going to say earlier. So Drone XL is saying the date is the 23rd. That's the date Drone XL has published, and that is a date similar to what I've heard. I can't give you the exact date that I've heard, but that is very close to the date that I've heard. However, the thing is, we're supposed to get an announcement on that date, and then supposedly we'll be able to purchase Avata bundles that day or very quickly after that, but the air unit will be delayed until sometime in September. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
So basically they'll announce the air unit, but if you're an FPV pilot, you won't be able to buy that air unit for, it looks like, within a month or so of the Avata release.
All right. I don't know why they wouldn't release them at the same time.
Yeah, it seems like maybe they're not complete or something. All the leak information is earlier for the air unit, right? So it's harder to get information. There hasn't been as much filled out info on the spec sheets. There's less leak pictures. I feel like the push for that is less hard, so it does make sense that it's releasing later.
Okay.
For sure. So.
All right.
Oh, and then the last thing is just on that paperwork that I had. One of the features for the DJI goggles says support Twitter, YouTube, and other video software through DLNA streaming screen to goggles to watch. So I don't know what that means. I guess there's some kind of streaming system you can send to the goggles, but maybe it makes me think they're going to drop the AV in and they're only going to do this Wi-Fi to the goggles or something. But
why would you stream into the goggles? That feels to me like they're talking about streaming directly from the goggles.
It says supports up to 4K display, so I think it means the DLNA 4K enabled display can send to the goggles, but I don't know. Yeah,
DLNA is a video delivery protocol. Yeah, so the goggles may be able to take a video feed in via Wi-Fi.
Sounds like over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or something. Yeah, some kind of
that's interesting.
Local there.
I don't know. I'm a little uncertain what that's for, but that is interesting.
The other thing we got was latency numbers. So I'll just share latency numbers real quick. With the V2 goggles, they're still quoting the same latency numbers for low latency mode. So less than 28 is what they've always said. We know that less than 28 means 21 to whatever, right? We know
25.
how that. Yeah, 21 to 25. Like it's just their given number. So their given number for low latency on the goggles 2 is less than 30. So it's 1080p, 100 frames at less than 30. That's what they're claiming. So it sounds like we're going to get around 23, 24 milliseconds, somewhere in that pocket. That's my guess.
I don't want to come off like a hater, but I feel like the DJI 1080p is going to deliver the kind of performance that currently Fat Shark Walk Snail is still like, where they're like, hold on, guys, we're tweaking the knobs.
Well, Walk Snail doesn't have a 100 FPS mode in 1080 yet, do they?
That is true. Only 720p
and DJI
100.
is coming out of the gate with one. So, yeah.
So, but if it only works with the new air unit, and the new air unit is $300 and bigger and heavier, it may not be.
We may see sort of a market separation.
It's a very interesting time to be alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty. Next up, we've got some more DJI news, but more closely related to the FPV world, and it pertains heavily to the future of the current DJI FPV system, which a lot of people are very heavily invested in. And the first piece of news, and this was, excuse me, this was such a big piece of news that I recorded a little release about it from my hotel room, is that DJI fired Caddx.
Yes.
And I just want to say, when Caddx when Walk Snail, who is definitely not Caddx, came out with this competing system, I reached out to my contact at Caddx and was like, do you anticipate that this will create any issues in your relationship with DJI? And they were like, no, DJI and Caddx have good relationship. We continue to be partners for win-win or whatever. I'm sorry, that's not a direct quote. I'm just making fun of sort of Chinese sales speak. And I was like, oh, okay, well, good for you. Good for you. And then, like, this news came out. DJI was like, hey, Caddx, you think you could get away with this? You're fired. I was like, I thought that might happen.
Yeah. So we should clarify. We've got a statement by Caddx. DJI didn't publicly fire them, but Caddx said they were fired by DJI, essentially.
Let's show the statement, because we should. Yeah. That's responsible. This is the statement from Caddx. I'm not going to read the whole thing.
Yeah, they said DJI decided to stop cooperating with us. That's essentially the idea there. So basically they've got a bunch of stuff still in stock, but obviously they aren't going to be able to sell anything from DJI anymore in the future once they run out of stock. It sounds like they will be selling cameras as long as they can, but that's kind of up in the air. And then moving forward, they'll just be supplying stuff from Walk Snail, and they hope you follow them to Walk Snail, essentially is the statement.
And I think this is a really clever way of framing this as sort of a positive. It says, I'm sorry. I've just put hot sauce in my eyeball.
Oh no, that's no good.
Pause that for a second. I was like, oh, I can ride this out, and then I was like, no, I can't. I'm making some hot pickles. I bought a big jar of pickles, and I just took a whole bottle of like ghost pepper hot sauce and poured it in there.
Well,
and apparently I still
only
had some on my finger.
Yeah. Hold
on, this is gonna pass. If my eye is super red, you'll know why. Oh my god. Cool. Let's see what we could do. If we can continue this. Caddx is really keeping it positive, because they say, the exclusive agreement ended and now we're all branching out, going our separate ways. Isn't this great? And, okay.
There is a positive way to spin a separation of two companies.
Yes. I mean, that's cool. That's good to keep it positive, especially when you've got a 500-pound gorilla like DJI out there. Maybe it's better not to throw too much mud in their eye and be like, nah, we're all still friends, aren't we, guys?
Hot sauce in their eye. Yeah.
Hot sauce, yeah. Caddx did say that they they said one of the reasons that they're happy to be doing this is that they can deliver things like Betaflight, MSP, DisplayPort, OSD, and so forth, things that DJI was slow to do or reluctant to do. And so Caddx is trying to spin this as, look, guys, DJI, we're going to do the things that DJI wouldn't do. That's why we made the walk snail system. Other people are looking at this and going, Caddx, you effed up a good thing, Caddx. DJI was making a good product, a product that we like, and now what are we going to do?
So the thing is, it depends on if their narrative is correct. If their narrative becomes true, if we find out that the narrative that they said that they're not going to be allowed to supply cameras for the new system, and nobody is, right? If that's a correct narrative, because that's what they're claiming, then to me that's a little more valid, because they knew that they weren't going to have a future in the DJI system with O3. So their thought was, hey, this is only fair for us to get out, and we'll stay until we get kicked out, and then we'll just roll with the new system, right? If you're in Caddx's position, I think that makes perfect sense if that's true. If we find out in a year that Runcam was not allowed to make cameras for the new system, there's just one DJI camera or two DJI cameras, and that's how it works. And I got to say that, and Runcam doesn't sell the air units or something, like all that kind of points to Caddx, like sort of making sense, at least, right?
That was my take. Now I will say that one of the things that I believe that may be wrong, and I want to call this out, I believe that DJI, when DJI first released the DJI FPV system, I thought to myself, these days are numbered, because DJI has an incentive to keep their product cycle going. So the Phantom gets phased out, the Phantom 2, the Phantom line goes away, the Mavic line comes. And they can't do it too quickly, or they'll just piss off their customers. But look at Immersion RC. They still make Tramp. Actually, they stopped recently, I think. Now but they made Tramp video transmitters for years and years and years and years and years, because they invested in that customer base. And that's what you see from a lot of RC companies. Look at FreeSky radios, right? But DJI just doesn't have that business model. So when it came out, I thought, how long do we have? Do we have 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? When is it going to end? And when we started hearing about the O3 system, then I thought, okay, this is it. It's coming to an end. The Vistas and the air units are going away. And I don't know that. That's not based on any information. I just felt it to be true. When I released that video, a couple of people came out and they said, look, my guy at DJI said, no, that's not true. DJI will not screw over the FPV market. And I thought, well, maybe that is or isn't true. But then I heard from a couple other people who were like, no, man, it's going away. And I don't know who's right.
Right.
But your take on this choice by Caddx to make the walk snail system and essentially stab DJI in the back, how that looks in the future will bear a lot on how long the V2, the Vista, and the air unit stay around, I think.
Yeah, basically what support DJI shows us in all aspects. Yeah. I mean, I got to be honest, even if all they could do was sell the old DJI stuff, I probably would, as Caddx, would have rather just switched to the new system, bailed, and got in bed with that shirt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you want the new system. Like if you can't sell the new system with new hardware and you can't help develop for it, or at least you can't be the main vendor for it, I think there is a large incentive to move to something else and move away from that partnership. So,
and as a person who runs my own business in a way, if I had the option to work for somebody else, let's say I was offered the option to make money by reading other people's scripts, but I'm on somebody else's channel, I'm not on my own channel, I'm just hosting their channel, they're writing the scripts and they have editorial control, and I'm just the face on camera, and I make more money than I make now. I'm not interested. Like, right. You want to be in charge of your own destiny. And I absolutely can see Caddx going, look, we have this opportunity to make this system, and we're going to try and make it the best system we can and control our own destiny. The good news for people who still use the V2 system is that Runcam is going to save us, right?
Yes. So at least from what we have so far, obviously we know Runcam for what we know them for, but they have been selling Runcam links for a while, the DJI Link, which is basically the same Vista.
It's just the same.
It's called the Link. The DJI calls it the Air Unit Lite. Caddx calls it the Vista. Runcam calls it the Link. So yeah, we've still got links from Runcam, and so we did get a couple statements from Runcam. So yeah, we got basically, yes, they're still keeping the partnership, and they put out another large statement, which I don't know that I pulled the right one. Let me check.
Let's see if this is the right one.
Yes, I did. Yes. So basically, they put out an official statement yesterday that was like, hey, listen, we're not discontinuing the link. We're going to continue providing VTX links with the following cameras. So they've got their cameras listed out. They've even got that split link kit, which is the thing that they offered before, which is that, you know, it adds the latency, but it does the extra recording. So it seems like all the products are still going to be available from them. And yeah, they do have a 120 FPS camera. It sounds like Caddx still will for a while as well.
Yeah.
And I think they'll be trying to support that as long as they can. So from what we know, we'll be able to get those for a while.
Ohmed Out asks, the Runcam will pair with DJI V2 goggles currently. Yeah, because Ohmed Out, the Runcam Link, the Caddx Vista, the DJI Air Unit, they're all made by DJI. They are not made by Caddx or Runcam. It's a front. And if you needed proof, and there's never been proof of that until basically now, where Runcam says they are the same. And in fact, Runcam says they'll even honor warranty and service requests for Caddx Vistas because they're all the same. The cameras are not the same. The Runcam Falcon camera is made by Runcam. The Caddx Nebula Pro camera is made by Caddx. But the VTXs are made by DJI, and they're all the same, and they're all cross-compatible.
Yes.
So the problem with this, and here's the problem with this, Blunty. Caddx is like, well, DJI, and we're no longer working with DJI. And Runcam is like, don't worry, we will save you. That's cool, but Runcam is still 100% at DJI's mercy here.
Sure.
And Runcam is saying, don't worry, the relationship will continue. Well, that's just what Caddx was saying 3 months ago. Didn't work out that way.
Yeah, very true.
And so
but
we
also
don't know.
Runcam did not make a competing digital system.
Well, sure.
Yes.
So what we don't know, what we can't know in this moment is when DJI will say, we're not interested in making the Vista Air Unit. We're going to have to stop calling it the Vista, won't we?
Yeah.
We're not interested in making this product anymore. And you know, I guess I'm just always afraid that shoe is going to drop. And so, you know, I'm like, oh, here, this is it. It's coming. DJI says, I hear no official statements, but, well, I don't want to say anything about which direction it came from because I don't want to give away the source even implicitly. But someone said, well, my guy I talked to at DJI, someone in the industry who has professional contacts with DJI said that they said, no, don't worry, we're going to keep making them. Then somebody else said, no, they're going to stop making them once the O3 gets established. So I don't know who to believe. But there's one thing I do know, and that's that Runcam is not in charge of this decision unless Runcam makes a competing project and pisses them off.
Yes. Also, we don't know if Runcam's going to sell air units, how that will work out. However, I did dig up a link. Somebody dug up a link for me. We have in the show notes here. DJI is still selling standalone air units on their website.
That's
so
true.
You can still buy in stock standalone DJI Air units on their website and add your own camera if you're still trying to get one. So hopefully that will continue. It does seem like they're at least still producing. So.
Yeah. MC's Creations points out they still make the NASA Lite. So people have done this. People have said this, Blunty. Let's spend just a couple more minutes on this topic because I think it's interesting. People say, well, DJI still makes parts for their older stuff. Well, that's true, but that's parts for an old thing. So that's a little different. Does DJI still make the Phantom 1? Can you still buy a Phantom 1? Or a Phantom 3 or whatever? I mean...
I don't know. You can't buy a DJI Light Bridge, right?
Can you?
I mean,
yeah, that was the example the commenter made. They said, you can still get spare parts for a DJI Light Bridge. I'm like, well, spare parts for something is different than still being able to buy, like, a new product. And I'm not sure if the Light...
Actually, Drone Nerds has a Light Bridge to ground unit. On back order. I wonder if that means they can order them?
So I would be interested to hear more about that because, yes, DJI has the resources to continue to support old products for customers who purchase the product, which is something that smaller companies really can't do. But when DJI brings in the Mavic, are they still selling Phantoms? And so the question, I guess, would be, how much is the O3 system seen as a sort of a generational change that phases out the old one?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a big difference in that, because especially if DJI doesn't provide any new camera. Like, I can't tell if we want to go back to that leak picture. Maybe it's the bottom picture in that Imager album of the air unit.
Okay.
You know, I can't tell how big that camera is for the life of me. It's in white space. It's all the way at the bottom.
Yeah.
So it's in white space, right? So that could be 28 millimeter. That could be 32 millimeter. That could be 20 millimeter. It's hard for me to tell exactly how big that is.
Yeah.
And so the question is, if that's like a 28, God forbid, like, you're going to see, I think you'll see a huge separation. You'll see all these pilots that still want to run nano cameras, micro cameras, that have frames that don't fit anything like this. I mean, there's a whole generation of parts that were built for cameras that are not that big. If that happens to be like the OG DJI air unit size, maybe there's like a squeeze in, because people are still using those OG air unit cameras. There's still some, you know, you can still squeeze carbon plates and stuff and fit them. I don't expect that to be 19. It doesn't look anything like 19 millimeters. So well, I think that's going to be that might be like a generational gap for us, right? Like, I can see a lot of people staying on old systems just because of reasons like that, and compatibility with V1 goggles and things like that too.
We should also say that there's something unique about the DJI FPV systems, which is that there are a lot of third-party companies that rely, the iFlight, the GEP-RC. If DJI were to pull the rug on that system, all of these other companies would be screwed. And that's something that doesn't exist for any other DJI product in exactly that way. So who knows? Hopefully DJI keeps, I mean, for the people, like, this is still what I have in most of my quads. And if the rug got pulled, I'd be sad. Hopefully it sticks around for another few years.
You know, that's a good point. How many vendors did they have regularly ordering a Lightbridge 2 when it was canceled, right? Like, we're currently, you've got how many vendors ordering, like, iFlight, like you said, like, there's all these companies, iFlight and Flywoo and Beta, and like, all these companies are regularly making orders. And, you know, I would imagine that does reflect somehow on their back end, at least go like, hey, maybe these are worth making because this number is over this number. So, yeah.
I put that in the more likely than not to keep making it column, you know? So, alrighty. Well, a very interesting time to be in the world of FPV. For the time being, though, system's still available through Runcam, camera's still available through Caddx. If you're solidly invested in the DJI V2 system, you are still okay for the time being.
It sounds like there's even stock of like Nebula Pro Vista unit, like bundles that'll be around for a while. There's a lot of stock that I've seen around. So
yeah. Alrighty. The next major, what did I do? The next major piece of news, and this is bad news, is that Race Day Quads lost their lawsuit.
Yes.
And that means that any hope that we had that remote ID might not go into effect is now gone. It will go into effect, and we got to figure out what that means for us.
I think the only recourse is they would have to appeal to the Supreme Court. And I don't think there's preparation from anybody to want to do that based on the amount of money they spent and the amount of money it would cost and the realistic idea that it would go through, right? So,
yeah. I mean, the current Supreme Court seems to be pretty big on rolling back governmental. Like, they just gutted the federal environmental, the EPA. They just gutted the EPA and said that if the law does not specifically mandate these exact things, then you can't do it. Do we want them to gut the FAA? I don't know. And like you said, Blunty, it would be a lot of money to bring that case.
I know Tyler's estimate for just the District Court of Appeals was $200K. I don't know what they ended up spending. But I know they only made like 83K on the GoFundMe. I don't know what they made from the donations and other things, but I imagine they spent quite a bit of money out of pocket for that, defense or for that appeal. So, I don't know that anybody's in the position to fund a Supreme Court fight.
Yeah, no. So this is where we're at. And the question, I guess, is, what does this mean for us right now, Blunty? That's where I want to sort of focus. Like, that's the news. We lost. Okay. You can read the decision. The decision is very disappointing. Almost feels like it was a foregone conclusion, to be honest with you. The decision reads basically like this. Lol, of course you need remote ID. These guys.
Yeah.
That's how Like that's
the way I read it was, there's no world in which this is enough to turn over the Constitution or to turn over like what you think is a constitutional violation, because that's a big precedent to set. And it seems to me like nobody wanted to set a precedent there based on that information and based on the arguments that were had. You know, we said before when we listened to the case, it sounded like the judges presented better arguments than the people that were arguing, just because of the way that they drilled down the FAA guy. But obviously, when you think about how they're going to put that on paper and then have to deal with it later with precedent and down the line, I think probably opinions change a lot and things happen differently on paper than happen in the court. So. Yeah.
So here's where we're at, Blunty. We've got a quick summary. There are a couple links in the...
so I don't know how you want to show it. So basically, we got... maybe, can we show this quick part? Like this, the write-up I did here? Maybe we could talk about it from this. Just
yeah. That's a great idea. That's exactly what I want to do. Thank you.
Okay.
Blunty, and thank you for writing this up, Blunty. Let me see if I can zoom in here.
So we tried to make it a little more user-friendly to kind of go through the main points, and then we've got a bunch more specific stuff we can talk about. But basically, the idea is, you know, under remote ID here, basically, all current recreational and commercial drone rules will still apply. So everything you currently got to do, you still got to do, right? You still got to register, you still got to pass your trust, all that stuff. But it adds remote ID. So in about a month, on September 16th, the manufacturers will be required to install a remote ID system in any drone that is sold as a complete kit. The FAA doesn't have a perfect definition of complete kit. It's just a sort of a suggested definition, because that's how they love to do things. But basically, the definition is something to the effect of has the motors, has the drivetrain, has basically all the pieces, and like has the ESCs, has the flight control device, and has the receiver. So from what we know, for any drone manufacturer, even from manufacturers who like make a bind and fly, right? Who make these custom builds.
The GEPRC, the diatones of the world.
Yeah, for these to be legally sold here, they will need to either install a remote ID system and register with the government, with the FAA, to show that they are a standard manufacturer, or they will need to provide plug-and-play versions, which are essentially drones without a receiver or some part that's fundamental to the flight, which receiver seems the most obvious to all of us, because it's the easiest to kind of plug in with the plug, right?
And let's be clear about this, that the requirements to be a remote ID approved manufacturer are substantial. There's record keeping requirement, and in addition to that, the remote ID system itself needs, like Captain Bry demonstrated a remote ID compliant system with his Express LRS hardware and Betaflight and a GPS unit. And the problem is that the remote ID system, for it to be an approved manufacturer, needs to be approved by the FAA. And it's not just going to be some open source thing you cobble together, because that would be easy to defeat. So the DJI, the Skydio, the Teal drones of the world, they are going to go to the FAA, they're going to pay their lawyers, they're going to jump through hoops and become officially approved manufacturers. And they will sell drones with remote ID built in. But hobbyists, the iFlights, the Diatones, the GEPRCs of the world, forget about it. They're not going to jump through those hoops. And if they did jump through those hoops, the hardware, like, you can't put integrated remote ID into Betaflight, because Betaflight's open source and anyone could just hack it, and the FAA won't have that. Am I right there?
I'm not 100% sure that's the case, because I don't know how the ASTM standard reads. So one of the things they did announce just recently in the last week was they announced some of the standards that we can go by. And one of them is the ASTM standard. And that's basically a remote ID standard they developed. That's here. Basically, that's a remote ID standard they developed with guidelines for how you apply it. However, unfortunately, it's a $60 payment because it's like a standard from the ASTM Foundation or whatever, so they charge for their standards. But it does appear that it's sort of just a general, like, hey, you got to broadcast on Wi-Fi, and you got to follow these instructions, and you got to include these things. It doesn't seem, from what I've seen of it, it doesn't like necessarily automatically restrict open source. It doesn't necessarily automatically say.
I thought there were requirements in the remote ID law, in the rule, which that said that it basically had to be tamper-proof.
It can't be exactly. It can't be tamper-proof, but they talk about that in the version of, like, you can't, like, peel the, like, there needs to be a sticker showing that you didn't break into the device, sort of thing. Like that's the way I read that, right? So
Maybe
it seems
you're
like
suggesting maybe there's a loophole there where it's like, oh, it's tamper-proof. Like the little adhesive that we peel off our receivers.
correct.
That's quote-unquote tamper-proof. Perhaps.
Yes, that sort of thing seems to be the case anyway, of how they'll do it. So, but yes, it does not seem like most of the manufacturers will be doing that. They'll be instead providing drones that are not complete kits. They'll be plug and play or some style of that, to be legally compliant that you would buy. So
But
for us, go ahead.
All that does is shift the onus from the manufacturer onto the person who assembles
Onto
the
the
drone.
user.
In other words, you.
Correct. The one thing that a lot of people are against, obviously, is import bans and restrictions on purchases, right? So, like, at least we have a way to purchase the things we were purchasing before in the same way or a very similar
Right.
way. And then we get to decide how to follow the law or not follow the law as like a free citizen. I think that's sort of the way I look at that, right?
I mean,
that's a
that is
benefit.
good.
That's good, right?
The inability to buy a bind and fly hobby drone is annoying, but many people are going to swap their receivers anyway. So saying to basically the first major step that this law may have on the United States is that you won't be able to buy a bind and fly. You'll have to buy a plug and play and install your own receiver, which is not the end of the world. Now that starts in 2023. The manufacturers have to comply in just about a month from now. And that's when we will stop seeing bind and flies sold into the USA, except from large companies like DJI, Skydio, Teal, and so forth.
And we say
So
that
we're
that's
expecting-
probably, but I don't know that we'll see, like, I don't know that the FAA has the power to immediately implement a ban. So, like, I don't know that we'll see, like, an import ban or, like, restrictions. So I think it will depend on, like, compliance of companies. Like, Banggood very well still may sell you a bind and fly. Like, I don't know that there's going to be any
Yeah, they don't give
restriction
a
to
shit.
actually stop Banggood from selling you a
But
bind
like
and fly, right?
a company like iFlight that tries to toe
would
the line
expect-
is
I
probably
would
going to, yeah.
In fact, iFlight will follow suit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then
So like you said,
in-
users will
in a
need to be
year from
required
now,
to comply.
what
In a
will
year
users
and a
have to do?
month. So in a year and a month, users will have to have remote ID. So that means if your drone is registered, so that means either your drone is over 250 grams or 249 grams, or you are 107 doing a 107 flight, right? So you're making money. Either of those, that drone needs to be registered, and that means you'll need remote ID. So there'll be 3 ways that you can comply with remote ID when that system comes out. You either buy a drone with it built in, okay, and that's going to add the benefit of if you buy it with it built in, you're going to be allowed to do beyond visual line of sight within this law. You still can't do it if you're not allowed to otherwise, right? You'll still have to have your spotter and stuff. However, within this law, you're allowed BVLOS with remote ID built in, so that it's just kind of part of it. However, if you buy a drone without remote ID and you add that drone in, or you add that remote ID module in, you can fly within the standard laws you do now, but you must stay in visual line of sight. And unfortunately, with what we'll discuss in just a second, that seems to include not having the goggles on, and there's kind of debate back and forth about that, whether that's going to apply or not. And then basically the third option, real quick, let's just say the third option is going to be if you don't do any remote ID, they legally only want you to fly at a FRIA, which is a FAA recognized identification area. It's like kind of a box they build. A group will register as a CBO, community-based organization, and then they'll be able to apply for FRIAs, which are locations will be able to fly without remote ID. That also requires a visual line of sight. So technically, you might not be able to do FPV there. So maybe we can look at that specific stuff.
Now, I want to call out 2 major problems with the way the law seems to be written, and then I want to put a great big caveat on those. And the 2 major problems with the way the law seems to be written are, number one, that there seems to be no way under the current writing of the law for a home-built, self-assembled quad to be flown with FPV legally. And there seems to be no way for a 107 to use a home-built quad, and especially with FPV. So it sure seems like this rules out FPV entirely. Now, I would like to point out that currently FPV is not legal unless you have a spotter standing next to you at all times, and that the spotter always has eyes on the drone. And I don't think it would surprise many people to learn that many FPV pilots are not following that law. So many people are already flying illegally, and many of them will be like, oh, look, here's another law that I'm breaking. But I do want to point out, and we're not ready to cover this under the news yet, but I've talked to Dave Messina of the FPV Freedom Coalition, and I raised these issues with him. And I said, Dave, does remote ID basically mean you cannot fly FPV legally anymore unless you're flying a pre-built drone, like from a DJI or so forth? And he said that he understands that is how the wording of the law seems to be, but that there are other conversations that he has had, and this is the part that we're not prepared to get into until he's ready to make a statement.
Well, we've got that statement.
He thinks it's not as bad. We've got the statements ready?
That first link is that statement, basically. It's like an organized statement by them that kind of goes through all the conversations they've had and where they think all the laws will apply.
And the
FPV Freedom Coalition.
Oh, I didn't actually realize that was ready. Oh, that's
Yes.
good. Well, that's what I get for not preparing better. But I do want to say that this is, before we look at the statement, that reading of the law is a strict reading of what the law actually says. Certainly seems to say FPV is no longer legal now unless you're flying a DJI drone.
It specifically says manipulation of the sticks. So, and because it defines manipulation of the sticks and not visual line of sight, and visual line of sight is defined as manipulation of the sticks or spotter, then it becomes a situation where we assume that they're going to follow the letter of the law, and it says if you're not the person manipulating the sticks, you're in a violation. However, they said they basically they had a conversation both.
So let's look at that conversation.
Yes.
So this is, by the way, from Dave Messina of the FPV Freedom Coalition, fpvfc.org. Well worth a look. And let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, so they've got a summary. If you wanted a more detailed summary of what we discussed, they basically summarize, everything that they know about remote ID, how it will affect everyone, who's exempt, and how it will apply. It's just a more detailed thing of what we've gone over. But basically, as we scroll down here...
see if I can zoom this in. Hang on one second.
Yeah. So if you go...
There we go.
If you go all the way down to the section, the heading will be Remote ID Rule. That's where we want to go. Keep going there. Keep going.
There we go.
So that third point here, the third bullet point is what we're discussing. So sections 89, 115, A and B describe part 107 and 44809, which is the recreational, as individual manipulating controls of the UAF. In 107 and 44809, the Rec and Commercial Law, they say visual observer is when it's FPV is used. The reference is made to visual observer when we use FPV. So basically, they're saying, is that omission correct, or what is supposed to happen there? So they said the subject was discussed at the FAA on January 21st, 2021, and the FAA described their intent to continue to be supportive of recreational UAS flight, and in particular, how it advances STEM initiative. While the rule does not explicitly call out FPV operations are still permitted under the Rec and Commercial laws. We feel a request for an advisory circular from the FAA clarifying the use of FPV would be welcomed and likely request this of the FAA. So that's something I've been talking with Dave Messina about as well. They are going to request an advisory circular from the FAA, clearing this up for us so that we don't have to rely on somebody's word. One thing I want to mention real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I worked in cannabis for quite a while. And one of the things I did in cannabis was compliance to the law. And one thing you learn about government organizations is it doesn't matter what it says on the page.
Right.
It's very odd. You would expect that it matters directly what's said on the page, and that's direct interpretation, and you handle it letter of the law. But that is not how it functions on day to day. Cannabis, day in and day out, you are dealing with interpretations. It's constant interpretations. When you talk to an inspector, this inspector might have a different interpretation as another one. And it depends on the inspector that you get, on the day that you get them, and how they feel. And they are allowed to make their own decisions in these cases for these inspection systems. So I expect it's very similar in other government organizations. And when you talk to somebody and they say, we don't expect or intend to enforce it like that,
right,
it kind of does work like that. And in a lot of cases, they'll follow that if that same person is in place, right?
And here's why this is important. Because like Eirik Toft in the Discord says, I'm basing my information on this video, watching Greg talk about the rules as written, and he links to a video from Pilot Institute. Then you've got guys like XJet, Bruce, and who look at the wording of the law and they say the sky is falling, and they're not wrong that the law as written has some pretty bad shit in it. But when you
Yes.
go and you talk to somebody like Dave Messina is involved in the ARC, the recommendations committees. He is talking to the people from the FAA, and he is asking them questions and giving them input. And when he comes back and he says, yes, this is what the law says, but I had a conversation with so-and-so, and he said that that wasn't their intent. That carries weight. That carries weight. Because the FAA can just put out an advisory circular and go, no, FPV is fine. And that's it.
Yep.
So,
And that,
well, I guess
I'll
the
just say
message...
that's part of what he's doing.
Yeah.
That's part of his goal. Yeah.
The message that I want to get across to people is that the wording of the law is as bad as people are saying it is. But those people are not talking to the actual movers and shakers behind the scenes, and they don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And it's bad that there's a law on the books that has bad shit in it. It would be better if the law did not exist. But
100%.
Since the law does exist, the next thing we have to do is we have to say, well, how is this going to actually be enforced? And when people like Dave Messina come back and they say, no, the FAA told me that they weren't going to do this. Something's wrong here. It behooves us to just take a breath and see how that plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it'll be interesting definitely to see how it plays out. We have people like Dave and the rest of the FPV Freedom Coalition fighting for us and making sure that they're staying on top of this stuff. We also have situations like, I just want to bring up, we had the BVLS ARC committee. So there's a committee that's literally just trying to get new rules for beyond visual line of sight operations. They're pushing for things like shielded operations, like we've discussed before. Basically, like if you're in your backyard flying under your tree line, why should you need remote ID? Things like that are being worked on currently. So there's always hope in that as well. And then, constantly, they're just constantly talking to people and trying to get stuff figured out. As far as where things are going to land and try to get, like you said, the advisory circulars put out and things corrected more clearly so that we know where things are going to end up.
Now, okay. So, and by the way, I'm working on a video, I'm researching, I'm talking to people like Dave Messina and so forth, and hopefully we'll be able to get a video out summarizing this in a little more depth and letting people know what to expect. Today, though, who was it? June Loco said, just tell us the loopholes. Well, the loophole today is that the FAA has almost no resources to enforce this. So chances are that the average man on the street, and I don't want to be seen, dear FAA, I'm not encouraging anyone to break the rules, but chances are that the average man on the street will not know this exists, not care. They may look up and go, why can't I buy any bind and flies? Why is everybody selling plug and plays now? So weird. But the average man on the street or woman on the street will just ignore this and will not really run up against anything. And if anybody does hassle you, just say, oh, yeah, I built this before September 6th. I would suggest that all of you start building quads today. Build like 50 or 100 quads before September 16th.
The sale is only a grandfather for sale, right? Not use.
Right.
Right.
If I build it before September 16th, it's exempt, right?
No.
No?
But because you're not selling it. That's my point.
Damn. All right.
It's only like if a manufacturer makes it and puts it up for sale before that date, they can sell whatever they want until that date, and then they can sell the old stock out. But for a person, you'll still have to comply.
Well,
the one thing I'll just say, like, we said before, but this was a task by Congress. So the FAA didn't decide to do remote ID. Congress was like, hey, we're worried about the skies and drones. We don't know much about it. Please fix it. Make remote ID. That's what they told the FAA to do. And that's why we have final rule. So, and that's why we have the NPRM, and that's why we have all that we have, the remote ID rules. So it's worth considering that a group who was tasked with doing this, and their whole goal was not to do this in the first place, and who doesn't typically like extra work because they're government employees, I don't expect to see hardcore enforcement right off the gate, gung-ho. Like, it doesn't make sense, right?
I mean, that's small consolation, but sure.
There's no driving factor for that. There's no, from what I've seen, there's no like finder's fee for law enforcement fining you for the FAA. Like, how many cops are going to be interested in weighing your drone?
I mean, the
app
FAA
out?
is actively working on getting local police to help them do this.
The difference is local police helping. Do they pay them? Like, how many local police are going to give a shit to go out to the thing?
The ones who want to hassle
getting, like,
someone who's flying their drone. This will be an excuse to hassle. There are two ways that this will play out in real life.
There was already an excuse to hassle, though. That's the way I look at it. Like, most of these places already have laws that you can't fly at the park. They could easily go hassle you in the same place, but they don't. I don't know. Maybe some places they do, but
Yeah.
we'll see how enforcement works out. I don't know that there's any money set aside for education either, so I'm not sure how that will work.
Yeah. There we go. That's where we're at right now. We'll see how that plays out going forward. I think the people who mostly need to be concerned are people like me.
Yes.
Because if I am flying a self-assembled drone, if I'm doing a review, then it's a 107 operation, and if it is plausible that there is a spotter there off camera who is keeping my drone in view while I fly it, then nobody's going to bother me. But if the rule says I'm going to need to have a screen. Because if you're looking at a screen, then you can still maintain visual line of sight. That's going to be the new plausible deniability, I suppose. Is like, oh, I've got this screen that I use. No, I wasn't wearing the goggles while I was flying, Mr. FAA inspector. Yeah. That's where, until there's an advisory circular. And that's the one thing, the one other thing I wanted to say before we move on from this story, feels like it's about time to move on, is that someone in the chat said, yeah, but when push comes to shove, the letter of the law is what matters. And that's why we need an advisory circular, which is an official statement from the FAA about their interpretation of the rule. And that carries legal weight.
And they will be submitting and pushing for one ASAP. So. Okay.
Alrighty. The spotters, licensed drive spotters must be co-located with the person operating the controls or the pilot in command. So you can't go BVLOS with enough spotters just using a radio system or something. They explicitly don't let you do that. Okay. Those are the three biggest things that we've got this week. We've got just a couple more little things, including some events, and it's barely news.
I think actually the next one's going to be pretty big for quite a few people, because with something I've complained about quite a bit. I've bitched a lot. And then I've talked to the developers a lot of Betaflight. I've had a lot of communications with a lot of people. And it's finally happened. The DJI OSD hack, the one that was called a hack and was not allowed to submit to Betaflight, is now being submitted to Betaflight with some changes to make it a little more user-friendly and a little better on the code side. And now you will have the ability to, within the normal Betaflight build, not a special pull, you'll have the ability to change the DJI OSD elements like you'd expect and replace that craft name and however you normally handle it. So.
In Betaflight 4.4.
4.4, yeah. Which I could just say, we didn't put it in the show notes, but they've decided to, I think it's final on the Betaflight feature freeze for 4.4 will be on November 1st, 2022. So.
Wow, that's way less than 2.5 years.
Yes. Yeah. So I would expect December, January, February, something like that. You'll have a 4.4 so that you can, you can use this. Pretty cool.
That's fantastic.
Glad it's finally been accepted.
Why
found a middle ground.
Why did they change their mind? They fought this for so effing long.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure in a way that is publicly nice to say, but I'll just say that attitudes have changed.
Fair enough.
And it was accepted. And there were also some changes on the code side that were agreed upon. So.
Very tactful of you, Blunty.
Yeah.
Well, it's always interesting when you choose to put somebody on blast versus when you choose to be tactful. You are capable of tact. How about that?
Yeah.
It's nice. For whatever reason, it's nice that has changed. That there were a lot of people who felt that was a feature that deserved to be added. There were some valid arguments the other way. But it's nice that people will be able to get this feature without having to flash custom code. So that's good. That's coming. Next up.
Got a couple events. Got a couple events for you. 3 events, actually. The first one is EdgeTX Fest.
EdgeTX Fest?
If you like EdgeTX and you live in Germany, or you can get to Nithenal, Germany on the 10th of September, which is coming up here in about a month, then EdgeTX is having a day fest. There's a dev team meet and greet, so anybody who lives over there will be over there. There's going to be free drawings for some radios and ExpressOS gear. You go hang out with some people and do some flying at the airfield there. Pretty cool.
All right, sure. Why not? EdgeTX Fest. Let's do it. Yeah. What else we got, Blunty?
All right, we got a reminder. We did tell you about this, but it's coming up again, and it's been a little while since we told you, and they've made some progress since we last talked about it. So FPV Drone Fest UK is coming on the 12th to the 14th in Nottingham, UK. And before they had a couple sponsors, but now they are Insta360 FPV Drone Fest. So they've got quite a few sponsors. They'll have a lot of prizes and events. They've got quite a bit more fleshed out stuff there. So you can buy a day ticket or 2-day ticket, and you can buy a spectator ticket or 2-day spectator ticket. If you want to go check it out. So FPV Drone Fest in Nottingham, UK on the 12th or the 14th. So that's coming up in just a few days, but we wanted to let you know just in case you're able to make it and did not know about that event. So.
I've heard they got a really bad sheriff over there in Nottingham. Real jerk. Just a real jerk.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Hopefully King John will come back soon. Take care of it.
Yeah. In other news, we've got one last reminder for you, which is...
People from Nottingham love that joke.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they've never... It's brand new.
Continue.
All right. So the last thing we want to talk to you about is Whooptopia. So Whooptopia is in January. And so normally, we told about it before. We wouldn't normally bring it up again. However, last year, Whooptopia sold out in 5 hours. Okay? So if you want a ticket, be ready, because August 15th at noon PST, you can order a ticket for Whooptopia. I would get there pretty quick because, again, last year was 5 hours. People know that now. I'm expecting maybe an hour or less that these would sell out. So I would definitely be ready to buy that ticket if you wanted to go to Whooptopia. We're just letting you know.
Eric Toft in the Discord is pointing out that West Coast Throwdown is next week. Are there still tickets for that? I was just out on the West Coast not too long ago.
Just a reminder to anybody out there, if you do have an event you want to let the news know about, you can always submit that to FPV News FPV News at knowitall.com. Is that right?
FPV news at fpvknowitall.com.
Been too long. News at fpvknowitall.com.
Some good dudes out there. Got to hang out with some of them a couple weeks ago when I was doing Rotor Riot stuff out in that area. And lastly, we've got It's Barely News, where we're going to talk about murder hornets and the interface of drones and murder hornets. But before we do that, let's just get our plugs in, Blunty. I want to let everybody know, if you want to help keep the news going and keep supporting the work we do here, I do have a Patreon. Patreon is a website where you can subscribe to me for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned it. If you value the kind of content we make here, it's one of the best ways to support. There's a link in the video description. Blunty, you also have a Patreon.
Yeah, patreon.com/itsblunty, and I'd be also happy for you to go over and subscribe up there. I don't do a lot of Patreon content. I think it's kind of similar to you. There's a little bit there, but mostly it's the extra benefits and helping me out. So I have a Discord you could join, but I also just appreciate your contribution so I can continue doing shows like this instead of having to work all the time. So I definitely appreciate it.
That's my goal. I just want to make sure you finish that Russian fishing game. As Blunty was like, hey, I think I'm going to have to get a real job. And I was like, no. I'll up my Patreon.
You can also get some help from me if you need troubleshooting. I've got a one-on-one service that you can sign up for. And it's easiest if you... I will just say, Google Forms are terrible. I've considered taking this down multiple times because it corrupts the information and it sends it double and it delays it. And so if you have not heard from me, or if you're having issues, I have all my contact information listed there. I'd suggest you hit me up on Discord. So if you message me on Discord, I can always see that. I always see notifications there, and I'm active and responsive.
The kind of person who wants to pay you $50 an hour to fix their quad may not really be all that up on Discord. I hate to say it.
Well, there is an email address there too if you really need it. Yeah, but Discord makes it a lot easier.
All right. Last up, we want to let you know that if you can't watch all of the live streams, then you should go check out Joshua Bardwell live stream clips, which is my live stream clips channel. All of the news gets cut up and put up here, as well as highlights from my live streams. We'd love to have you as a subscriber over there. Currently around 4.3 thousand subscribers, slowly climbing up. But if you just can't get enough Bardwell live stream content, that's where you should go. And there's a link down below. So, okay then. Let's get the last piece of news up. Murder hornets.
Yes, murder hornets, or I think they got a friendlier name for it. I'm trying to find it, but I can't remember. Anyway, murder hornets. You know what they are. You've heard of them before. But drones are now being used to
Oh,
combat
should we
them.
put a trigger warning on this? Ugh.
So basically, one of the biggest issues is murder hornets, or hornets in general, fly a long way sometimes to like make their nests. So when they find a queen and try to track it, and they're trying to go through the jungle, it's really tough. Or they're trying to go through bush or whatever, right? Any area where it's like heavily wooded, it's really difficult to chase them. So what they've been doing is they've been putting radio trackers on them and then chasing them with drones instead. And yeah, so they can find exactly where they go to nest, and they can eradicate them a lot faster instead of finding them after they start breeding. So,
Show me your nest. Give it to me. We must eradicate the murder hornets. All right.
yes. So drones always help him with everything, seems like, anyway.
Okay. Well, that is going to bring us to the end of the news for today. Thank you so much for coming out. It's good to be back. Blunty, it's good to be back.
Yeah.
We
Good to be back.
We have to read super chats. We got some super chats. I got to read the super chats. Mike
is
Bergman,
important.
thank you for a $10 super chat. Mike says you're a trooper, Bard. Well, we missed you. Maybe go rinse your eye, though. Oh, my eye's fine. I'll touch it again. I don't care. Ohmed Outs, thank you for $10 super chat. Can't wait to install a remote ID on all my quads. Not going to happen. Yeah. And MC's Creations, thank you for 5 Ray Eyes. Does the regulation say the spotter needs to be human? Yes, it needs to be human.
Yeah.
It needs to be human. All right, that's going to bring us to the end. We will see you next week. And I'll be back, yes, for real this time on Sunday with my normal live streaming content. Happy flying, everybody.
Take it easy, guys.
There we go.